Well, we'll move to this. The new questions about President Trump's relationship now with the top disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, that member of the task force whom we see with the president most days. This is coming after the president retweeted a post that was critical of Dr. Fauci and called for his firing. That coming shortly after the doctor said this about whether the United States could have acted sooner in response of the spread of COVID-19. Watch.
I mean, obviously, you could logically say that if you had a process that was ongoing and you started mitigation earlier, you could have saved lives. Obviously, no one is going to deny that. But what goes into those kinds of decisions is complicated. If we had, right from the very beginning, shut everything down, it may have been a little bit different. But there was a lot of pushback about shutting things down back then.
Dr. Fauci has run the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases for more than 3 decades and through 6 administrations, just to give you a little perspective on his background. Marie, what is the significance of what we watched play out this weekend on this matter?
Dr. Fauci has, throughout this entire crisis, been a voice of scientific reason, of scientific facts. I think that's why you've seen him get so much widespread acclaim from both Democrats and Republicans. Across the partisan spectrum, people are looking to Dr. Fauci to tell the truth. And that's what he did this weekend. And I think that's why he's in his position. That's why I'm glad he's still in his position, because that's what scientists and doctors need to do. I have long ago given up trying to read the tea leaves of Donald Trump's Twitter and try and parse out from that what might come policy-wise. But I hate the fact that he retweeted someone calling for Dr. Fauci's firing. And if President Trump did anything to sideline Dr. Fauci, to try and move him out of such a prominent role, I hope you would hear pushback from Democrats and Republicans, because Dr. Fauci has played such an important role in helping the American people understand this crisis, Harris.
You know, there seems to be, Melissa, bipartisan agreement on what Marie Harf just said. I'll take it a step further, though. The palace intrigue and the fighting and all, I don't know if we have time for that, like as a nation, Melissa.
Yeah. No, we absolutely don't. Although when you say that, you know, he went out this weekend and told the truth, the implication is that the president is not telling the truth. And I don't think that's accurate. I think that what the president is reacting to is this idea that he takes his responsibility for the health and welfare of the American people very personally and you know, very seriously. And so I would imagine that when he feels like someone is attacking him potentially for not doing his very best to safeguard America's health and welfare, that, you know, he gets very angry, and that's where those tweets come from, and he just takes it incredibly personally. I agree with Marie that I think that Dr. Fauci is somebody who, you know, both sides really trust, and it's essential that he's part of the conversation and that he continues in his post. And I think that all of us we take comfort in the fact that these two do disagree and then move along. And Dr. Fauci has said repeatedly, you know, the president listens to me even when we disagree. He listens to me and we have a conversation. I hear him, he hears me, and she's right. That is essential going forward.
You know, Guy, I look at this and I wrote down just a note to myself about when I watch public people fight and how usually, as Melissa's pointing out, usually the debate sometimes can be edifying because you can see that one person maybe has your point of view, the other person doesn't, so on and so forth, and how they work it out. And I think Melissa's absolutely right about that. It's actually pretty healing to see that go forth, because at least you think it's not about who's right, but what's right, which is always my goal. I do have to say, though, at times the public fight is not helpful when it's just about the sniping. Where do you put this?
Well, I think with Dr. Fauci and this little flap involving the weekend, I think if you watch the full interview that he did on another network that got so much attention, he was actually in some ways, I think, defending the president, because there were people out there, and there was a CNN doctor saying, oh, they should have acted sooner. They were far too late to do what was necessary. And Fauci came back and said, actually, it's really not that simple for all these various reasons. I think he and the president really, again, are basically on the same page here. There is a fringe of people, I think it's deeply irresponsible, who want to see Dr. Fauci fired. I think that's really would be a terrible idea for the country. Even if you disagree with what he's done, or you think we've gone too far, to fire this man who's an eminent expert, I think would be a disastrous mistake. The thing that is also bothersome to me, Harris, is the degree to which some in the media seem very invested in this palace intrigue plotline, where they sort of stoke every ember, almost like they're trying to goad the president into doing something that would be very bad for the country, but could be bad for him politically. So they love expressing concerns about how this might happen. It almost feels like a perverse rooting interest, and I wish they would knock that off.
You know, I kind of put it in almost another lane, too. I mean, you can have that point of view that it's political, or this might even be worse. Is it personal? Are they looking for those moments to light up themselves in a moment that really isn't even focused on them? I don't know. It's just a question. Dr. Nashwat, I want to go to you before we go to a quick break, just to get your take on this. I mean, Dr. Fauci, I spit out a couple lines about his resume, but as another medical expert, when you look at this, what do you make of the going back and forth?
I have so much respect for Dr. Fauci. His number one priority are patients, not politics. And that I actually watched his full interview yesterday. That network, they twisted his words. He didn't absolutely say, yes, we should have done this. He said, you know, coulda, shoulda, woulda. Of course, in any situation, if you start from negative day, a negative timing back in November, it would have been a better outcome. He was generalizing his statement, but they twisted his words. I think what he's doing is doing everything in his power to protect Americans. That's what we need.
Interesting. You know, for a while about this time, we had been hearing regularly from Governor Cuomo. And one thing that he has said, Guy, and I heard you saying just a moment ago as Dr. Nashwat was talking, he said, you know, the time for going back and taking a look at what was done and the blame, so on and so forth, is not this time. He said it in many different ways. He said there are no blue states, no red states, just red, white, and blue. A quick last thought, and we'll move on.
There will be lots of time for finger pointing, and it's already here in some ways. I think that ultimately, and we'll talk about this later in the program, the results are going to be what matters most. And a lot of the partisan food fighting currently happening, I think, is probably a big turnoff to most people who just want their families to get back to work, but they want to be healthy first and foremost.